This is just an introduction to 6-1 graphing exploration. I'm just going to show you how to do a couple of problems and how to get started on this assignment. So we're going to be talking about quadratic functions, and we've done other types of functions before, but quadratics are just a new family. And so to start, we're going to practice graphing what's called the parent function. So all function families have a parent function, and this is the quadratic one. And so what I want you to do on this one is make some tables to start to see how this works. So I'm going to just choose some x values, such as those, and then I'm going to plug them in for x. So -2, square it, that's going to be +4. -1, square it, it's going to be 1. Remember, we're squaring, so we're taking the number times itself, and so it's always going to be positive. Then I'm going to graph those ordered pairs. So when I have -2, +4, and then -1, +1, 0, 0, 1, 1, and 2, 4. And so, So we're going to have this parabola, which is the name of that shape, and all quadratic functions are going to have that shape. They might be going, scooted over to the left or the right with a shift, or they might be reflected like that. They might be really tall and thin like this, or they might be really short and wide like that. But they're all parabolas, and what we're going to learn in this one is kind of how numbers affect our graphs. So in a parabola, we have the vertex, which is this point, and that point does a couple of things. It's called a max or a min. In this case, it would be a minimum, because it's the smallest or lowest point of the graph. It's called the vertex, so we write that as an ordered pair. It's a place where it changes from increasing to decreasing. So if I start at the left, it's going down until I get to the vertex, and then it starts going up, so that's increasing. And so for part of this, you're going to highlight, the last thing it says, highlight the increasing or decreasing part of the graph. And so with one color, I'm going to highlight the decreasing part, and so that's going to be that part of it. And then with another color, I'll highlight the increasing part. The domain for all quadratics is all real numbers, because basically think about it like this. What number can you square? You can square anything. Rational, irrationals, fractions, whole numbers, negatives, it doesn't matter. The range, remember, is how low does the graph go to how high does it go. And this one, it goes from 0, and it actually touches 0, and then it goes to infinity. So we're going to write the range as y is an element of 0. It's going to be inclusive to infinity. So with the parent function, you're going to practice graphing that, and on this assignment, I'm going to have you graph it over and over and over. I want you to be able to graph that in your sleep, pretty much, so no question what that graph is going to look like. As we move on to number 2, you'll notice we have the parent function, but there is one change, and that's this 2 right here. So in order to graph it, I want you to think about how that works, and making a table is probably a really good way to see. So try some numbers and see how that affects the graph. And then in number 3, how does it affect the graph if I have a 7 there? What is it going to do? You might have some guesses from prior knowledge, but I want you to try it and make sure. One thing I want you to notice on the parent function, so let me go back, and I'm going to erase some of the stuff that's here. But one thing I want you to notice on the parent function is, if I'm starting at 0, if I go over 1 and I go up 1, notice that 1 squared is 1. If I go over 2, then to get to the graph, I'm going to have to go up 4. And notice that 2 squared is 4. And if I go over 3, guess how high I'm going to go? It's going to be 9. And so 3 squared is 9. And so that means that if I input 3, I'm going to get out 9. If I input 2, I'm going to get out 4. If I input 0, I'm going to get 0. If I input -1, I'll get +1. And so there's that pattern that exists. And so as you're doing this, I want you to be looking for the patterns, and then notice how something like that number 2, how does that affect the pattern? And if you can understand that, it's going to make graphing this a lot easier. I also want you to notice the symmetry. So all quadratics have this symmetry, and so here the line of symmetry is right down the y-axis, so it's symmetric on that side. But think about if the graph was moved left or right, then the line of symmetry would be, again, moved over the left or right. But the line of symmetry is always going to be through the vertex. So we're going to be talking a lot in this unit about the graphs of quadratics and how it's affected by different numbers. So as you go through this assignment, you're answering all of these questions. You're graphing all of the graphs. You are then going to write a rule. So what do you think the rule is then if we have a number there? What does that do to the graph? Then we're going to come down here to this next section. You're going to graph the parent function again. Then you're going to take a look at these two situations. What happens? Write a rule. Then you're going to come down to the next one, graph the parent function again. Then look what happens here. Write a rule. Make sure you're making tables to make sure that you're getting the numbers right, because if you're getting the numbers right and your graph is looking right, you're going to be able to write a rule that's correct. If you're getting the numbers wrong, your rule is going to be wrong. When we go to the next page, again continuing, and you see some other differences. And so I'm taking you through all these different things that could happen and what does that do to the graph. Like I said, if you understand how these different numbers and signs and operations affect your graph, it's going to help you with not only quadratic families, but all other families as well. When you get to number 16, you're going to use the things that you've learned in the previous problems, and you're going to then take this equation and you're going to predict all of that without graphing it. Then you'll graph it to make sure that your prediction is correct. When you get to the next page, you're going to be asked about this question number 17, and you're going to be asked to explain. There's a lot more room than you really need. I want you to use, maybe that much room, just because I couldn't fit it on the other page. But you're going to let y equal 0, and then you're going to solve for x. Remember that solutions are called roots or zeros or solutions. And I want you to think about what does that mean when you solve it, and look at your graph and compare it to what it means when you solve it. When you get to the last page, you're going to use your graphing calculator to answer the questions, and so you're going to need to graph the equation. I have a video showing how to do number 20 and 21. So when you get to that point, you'll want to watch the video so it'll show you, and then you can use that to know how to do the rest of the questions. So for this whole assignment, you're going to make sure that you can answer all of the questions like, what are the solutions? How would I find that with a graphing calculator? You should be able to say the domain and range of any of them. You should be able to say the vertex. You should be able to state, just by looking at an equation, what is that going to look like? What do the numbers do to my equation, or my graph, I mean? And so those are all the things that you're going to need to be able to do. So make sure you thoroughly understand the rules. Okay, when you're done, you want to check your answers, but make sure you understand and bring questions to class so that you can ask and I can clear any misunderstandings up.